Hey there, Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting. Dodo Birds and Leaky Black. Matt Norlander is here with me. If you're watching live on YouTube or even later on YouTube, please smash the like button like you're Brandon Davies. You have consent. You know what he would do. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, please knock that out while you're here. Okay, dead leg. Big news today on the IARP front. Nearly 3 years after Memphis played James Wiseman against South Carolina State, Illinois, Chicago, and Oregon in defiance of the NCAA, the Tigers have received their punishment for that decision that triggered an investigation into Penny Hardaway's program. The punishment is light. 3 years probation, 3 games vacated, $5,000 fine, and that is basically it. No postseason ban, no suspension for Penny Hardaway. So let's just start there. Norlander, are you surprised that Memphis got off this lightly?
I think everyone's surprised that Memphis got off as lightly as it did. Let's just start there, because I know you are as well. Can we start? Can that be the starting point? I don't think anyone, literally anyone, maybe people in Memphis's athletic department thought this, but no one thought it was going to be this light.
In the months and weeks leading up to this, as I've, regularly talked about this on radio, I have consistently said that anything that doesn't include a postseason ban, if I were Memphis, I would take it. 6-game suspension for Penny Hardaway, sure. Fine, whatever. Probation, cool. Scholarship reductions, got it. Anything that didn't include a postseason ban, I would have been willing to take. And obviously, this punishment stops well short of that. I don't have cameras inside the athletic department right now, but I am confident they are thrilled and possibly throwing a party. Not only do I think this met the best reasonable expectations Memphis could have had, I think it probably exceeds them.
Has to exceed them. This was one of those deals where when it landed earlier this morning, I looked through everything. It was like, am I missing something? Like, before I sent out a couple of screen grabs of everything. I was like, all right, this is everything. $5,000 fine, 0.25% of the budget, 3 years probation. There's nothing on Penny here. Like, this is it. It is it. The IARP. There's a lot we need to get to provide context for our listeners and our viewers here, because this is an intriguing case. An obvious reminder that the Memphis IARP case is separate from all of the other ones, because this is not a case tied to the FBI stuff. We will get to that later in the podcast there. But them ruling the way they did is certainly extremely notable and surprising, because, and I don't have the full rundown on NCAA history. Again, this is not Committee on Infractions. This is not NCAA Committee on Infractions. This is the IARP, which will dissolve next year. I don't have the whole history of this. I feel kind of confident declaring that there's never been a school have at least 4 level 1 violations and a notice of allegations and come out of that with not at least one significant sanction. I wouldn't define any of the punishments Memphis received today as significant. A 3-year probationary period is not a significant punishment. Now, don't F up when you're on probation, or then it could get real serious in a hurry, but none of these are actually serious. This has been referred to as the cliche but accurate slap on the wrist. That's basically what's happened here. For Penny Hardaway to avoid any kind of suspension is obviously intriguing. You and I were both on the IARP's media call there. There's plenty of stuff to take away from that. But I will note that Hugh Frazier, who oversaw this case on the 15-member IARP board, he said, quote, it was more of the failures of the leaders of the university than the men's basketball coaching staff. He later reiterated what was in the report, that they focused a lot on Penny Hardaway's community-oriented leadership and philanthropic ventures before he became the men's basketball coach, and bringing context to that. I certainly want your opinions and thoughts on that. Memphis did not self-impose in this as well. This is why I think this is unprecedented. I don't think there's ever been a school to never self-impose anything amidst an investigation, get at least 4 level 1s, and have this low of a punishment in general. Overall, yes, the IARP looked at this and said, this seems like level 2 kind of stuff to us. And then one more quote from Hugh Frazier. He said, quote, our intention was to impact those with greater culpability, ellipsis mine here. The panel was intentional in not prescribing penalties that would have an impact on current student athletes. Whether that will be a philosophy that is embraced in future cases remains to be seen. I asked directly if that would be the case or if it was specific to this. Hugh Frazier was specific in saying it was specific to this case. So don't go thinking that just because Memphis didn't get something major and we weren't going to prescribe penalties to have an impact on current players. That doesn't necessarily mean yes or no either way. Same fates would land on Kansas, LSU, Louisville, and Arizona. Your thoughts, Parrish, on them getting out the way they did, and this other idea that they really took into account who Penny Hardaway is and who he was before he became the Memphis head coach, and that having clearly a significant sway in him not being punished and the program as well.
You mentioned, schools that have faced major violations or at least allegations, and then gotten off with a light punishment by self-imposing nothing and acknowledging nothing. North Carolina comes to mind. I don't know if it rises to the criteria you set, but North Carolina case obviously comes to mind. And I do think these are similar in the way that Memphis was able to effectively argue out of this. If you remember with the North Carolina case, I'll keep it as simple as I can keep it. It was pretty well established that North Carolina had fraudulent classes on its campus that student athletes were benefiting from. The way North Carolina argued out of that is they said, sure, but it's not your job to tell us what is a fraudulent class and what isn't. That's not the role of the NCAA. And it's not like only student athletes benefited from these classes. There are a lot of non-student athletes that were in these classes as well. Therefore, it is not an impermissible benefit for student athletes because it was available to everybody. And the NCAA kind of rolled over and said, okay, you got us. And that is not quite apples to apples, but more or less what Memphis argued here. Hey, did Penny Hardaway give $11,500 to James Wiseman's family? Yeah, sure he did. But he's given money to people his whole life. This is a born and raised Memphian who played in the NBA, made in excess of $100 million, got a lucrative Nike deal that is still a lucrative Nike deal, that donated $1 million to our athletic department back in 2008, and who has been helping underprivileged people from his community forever. So, yeah, he was a booster when he technically a booster when he provided James Wiseman's family with that money. But, we never as a university, took any real time to explain to him what that meant and what he could and could not do. So he just kept, helping people who needed help the same way Penny Hardaway has always done. And that is not to be punished. That is to be applauded. And that's more or less the argument that they made. And the IARP said, okay. Now, I think two things can be true at the same time. One, Penny Hardaway has thrown around money to people who could use it for his entire adult life. That is true. And I agree, should be applauded. You forget him as a basketball coach. What he means to the city is more than I think people outside of the city realize. Even as his coaching career got off to an uneven start, he faced some criticism, but he's still the type of guy who could walk into basically any restaurant in the area and literally get a standing ovation when he walked in, and be asked to take selfies with everybody. He's an incredibly important figure in the community. So that's true. This is also true. He wasn't helping James Wiseman's family because they needed help. He was moving them to Memphis so that he could play for Penny at East High School. That wasn't philanthropic as much as it was trying to get a 5-star center on your high school basketball team. But again, I give Memphis's attorneys a lot of credit. They were able to argue that what Penny did with James Wiseman isn't really any different than what Penny's been doing his entire life. And if it was a violation of the rules based on his booster status, then that's on us as a university for not properly educating him on what he could and could not do. So then the second part of it is you go, okay, but they still played James Wiseman in defiance of the NCAA when they knew they shouldn't have. How do you explain that one? And Memphis was able to argue that Penny didn't know James Wiseman was ineligible, which let's just speak plainly here. That is simply not believable. That's just not believable.
All right. This is why you pay lawyers. Because they made the case and the IARP bought it. Period, though. We can probably land on the same page here, Parrish. This detail is exactly why you sign up for the billable hours and get guys on retainer, because of this exact thing. Because Hugh Frazier was pressed multiple times on that media call today about the veracity of that claim, and he was steadfast in the IARP's panel believing the timeline of events for Memphis, that upon the first game of eligibility for James Wiseman, that South Carolina State, you should have trivia time me on that. I wouldn't have gotten that. I didn't remember South Carolina State. That Penny Hardaway was unaware at tip-off James Wiseman was technically ineligible by NCAA standards. I find that hard to believe. The thought 100% had to have crossed his mind, but Memphis's lawyers convinced them, and that's one of the key pieces of this case and why they were able to avoid
that is either the most dysfunctional athletic department in the country at the time, and it might have been, or just simply not true, right? Just simply not true. And I would lean towards not true. I mean, I promise, if we did a Candid Coaches right now and polled 100 college coaches, do you think Penny Hardaway knew James Wiseman was ineligible when he played James Wiseman? Like 100% would say yes. The other thing Hugh Frazier said as he was explaining this, he said, coaches don't get too deep into the eligibility issues. That's just a ridiculous statement. I mean, it's an outrageous statement. I don't even know. This is why people have no confidence in these people, because they say outrageous things like, well, coaches don't really deal with eligibility issues. What? Have you ever talked to a coach? Of course they deal with eligibility issues. But again, congrats to Memphis. Memphis more or less argued from a position of, we will save Penny Hardaway at all cost. And if it has to make our athletic department look ridiculous, then we'll just make our athletic department look ridiculous. And it worked. So mission accomplished. But I think, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm not going to be naive here. I'm not interested in arguing the point, but like, whether it's Penny Hardaway or literally any other coach in America, if your 5-star center is, projected possible number 1 pick in the draft is having eligibility issues, you're going to be aware of that. I say this as respectfully as I can say it. I find that outrageous to believe.
Here's the exact language from the ruling. This is the press release tied to the actual case ruling. Quote, the hearing panel, and I'm going to insert Wiseman. I'm not doing this student athlete number 1 nonsense. The hearing panel also included that the institution's leadership allowed Wiseman to participate in a November 5th, 2019 basketball contest without informing the head coach until after the contest that Wiseman had been determined to be ineligible to play. The case decision references an October 31, 2019 determination from an NCAA academic and membership affairs that informed Memphis that the 3 prospective student athletes who were then student athletes, good God, were ineligible to compete because they had received financial assistance from the head coach after he became a booster, but before he was hired by Memphis. Memphis disagreed with this determination and was informed of the steps to appeal of the academic and membership affairs decision, but Memphis stated, and the hearing panel found that it did not appeal. Absolutely wild. And hey, I was just as surprised with you over that. By the way, I mentioned the 4 level 1s. They were all tied to lack of institutional control, head coach responsibility, and failure to monitor. But at the heart of the decision of this case, remember that 4 level 1 allegations in the notice, level 1 violations in the notice of allegations. They are head coach control, lack of institutional control, and failure to monitor. That normally, even if a coach has left in the past, has led to relatively, recruiting restrictions, scholarship reductions, visits, all this stuff. That's not in play here whatsoever, which is kind of wild to me, particularly when you also had Mike Miller, who's now long gone, not cooperating whatsoever. I did ask if his lack of cooperation, I didn't name him by, identify him by name, but I did ask if that led to the delay, and I was told it was a lot of COVID stuff. I don't know. This still has taken way, way, way too long for us to finally get to this day. Oh, by the way, we are 5 years and 1 day removed. 5 years and 1 day exactly from the FBI cases. coming to light, which prompted this IARP to be formed, period, with all of this stuff. I don't know. Listen, I kind of do commend the IARP that's at kind of looking at Penny's overall situation and having a pragmatic look on it and saying this is what he did and who he was and how important he was in this community. I don't hate the ruling. Now, I will say a couple things. One, I kept this on my soundboard, and thank goodness, because Penny said this and the IARP listened.
Stop disrespecting me, bro. Stop disrespecting me, bro. Stop disrespecting me, bro.
And damn if they ever did listen. And the other thing, our boss, Adi Joseph, has specifically requested, I'm sorry, but he has specifically requested this drop to be played.
I was wrong.
We need to get back to this real quick.
Wrong about what?
You said that playing James Wiseman, I don't have the exact audio, that playing James Wiseman going in defiance of the NCAA would backfire on Memphis in a way that I think was going to be more egregious than the way that it played out here. I think that's what
I said. It was nonsensical and stupid. It still was. You know, that you beat the case 3 years later doesn't make it sensible or smart to do. I mean, listen, they should be celebrating over there. They still spent how many hours, how much money fighting this case, operating with a cloud over their head coach and program literally for years. Like,
was it worth it? At the end of the day,
no, it wasn't worth. In what way could you argue it was worth it? The guy played 3 games for you. How was it worth it?
I know.
What are you talking about? Like, I saw somebody else tweet, is this vindication for the Memphis athletic department? No. Like, what are you talking about? It was, you ready for this?
They're going to act like it.
You ready for this? It was still stupid to play James Wiseman in defiance of the NCAA. That you more or less got away with after fighting it, for years, doesn't mean that it was smart to do or anything other than stupid to do. Like, okay, you're drinking and driving, right? You drink and drive, but then you hire a really good lawyer and you get off. Are you vindicated for drinking and driving? Does it mean like, oh, see, it wasn't stupid for them to drink and drive? No, it was dumb for you to drink and drive. You got caught. And then you beat the case because you had some really good lawyers argue effectively. But it doesn't mean it was smart to drink and drive. I don't even understand that. Like, no, the Memphis athletic department was idiotic to allow James Wiseman to play under those circumstances. And fortunately, they more or less got away with it.
They absolutely did. One more quote from Frazier. We examined a very, very significant record, and we came to the conclusion that it didn't reach level 1. There would have been no difficulty with this panel arriving at the conclusion if they had been satisfied that conduct reached level 1. We did not find that. Given how long this case took to resolve, I have to take them at their word with that. As weird as it is to try and resolve the issue with like Penny not knowing Wiseman would have been ineligible, all the stuff with Mike Miller's hard drive that was material to the case. Listen, man, they said what they said, and the ruling is the ruling. I did not think we'd be coming on when we learned early this morning that this case was going public today. I didn't think we'd be coming on talking about a Memphis team that's got and a program that's got some real pep in its step. I mean, Penny Hardaway put out a statement earlier. It said, we have finally arrived at the end of an extremely challenging period, and I could not be more grateful. I would like to thank our players and their families, as well as our coaches and our support staff, for continuing to focus on what we could control as this process lingered. Believe me, none of this was easy, but this group always had faith. Tiger Nation, you have my eternal gratitude for continuing to believe in and supporting us. We never take that belief and support for granted. As I tell our team, we do what we do for our great city. It continues on. Lastly, it goes, it's now time to put all this behind us. Brighter days are ahead, and we cannot wait to share in the future successes as one Memphis. That's Penny Hardaway's statement there. And yeah, after the break, we'll get to the other cases that remain, but big time win. I mean, Penny Hardaway had been waiting on a win like this because he has kept the program relevant, but there have been a number of issues, Wiseman and otherwise, that have put Memphis in a negative light. We've hopped on here to talk about the Tigers for many reasons that aren't exactly the rosiest, GP. And here comes a win with the IRP. There's no appeal. They don't want an appeal. They're more than happy with this. They didn't self-impose anything, and they get out with this $5,000, 0.25% of the men's basketball budget as a fine, 3 years probation, no recruiting restrictions, no postseason ban. Penny Hardaway doesn't have to sit for 2 seconds under suspension. Humongous win and big day in your city.
No question. Like it is, trust me, whether it's friends or family members who care about that program, they are all ecstatic because the alternative to what they're dealing with right now would have been possibly, an announcement that says, with just a few weeks before the start of this season, no matter what happens, win every game you play, you're not going to the NCAA tournament. And that would have obviously been, pretty deflating and disappointing. As for what the Memphis ruling might mean for the other schools still dealing with IARP cases, we'll get into that next. But first, a word from our partners.
The UEFA Champions League. 9 months of heart-stopping, hold-your-breath exhilaration. While Mbappe shines in the city of lights, Benzema's racking up the hat tricks, and the Reds want Mo Magic in Liverpool. This ain't amateur hour. This is the best of the best of the best. This is the UEFA Champions League. Stream every match live on Paramount+.
So, Deadleg, you asked about what conclusions we might be able to draw from the results of the Memphis case as it pertains to the other cases still out there, and what kind of timeline we're looking at. What did you find out?
So, yeah, there's a few more notable things here. The timeline. Let's deal with the timeline first. My understanding, and I don't have this as 100%. My understanding, though, is next should be Kansas, and then Louisville. Maybe Louisville will jump because Louisville, having the Chris Mack stuff folded into its IARP case, has made the timeline of the Louisville case a little bit cloudy. Maybe it'll be next. Maybe it'll be last. But Louisville's been done. It's had its hearing. I expect that to come before the end of the year, and then. I think Arizona and then LSU are the final two. An NCAA liaison with the IRP was on earlier today on this call, and he said in his words that this will not wrap until, this was Derek Crawford, VP of Hearing Operations. He said, quote, late spring, early summer of 2023. He also said 2 schools haven't had their final hearing. I believe that is LSU, and I think it's Arizona. Those 2 are still waiting on all of that. So my projection of this is that over the college basketball season that's to come, we will have news about Kansas and Louisville come down in the middle of the season. We will hop on and do an emergency podcast about those schools as the season's going on. Maybe we get one of those before the season starts, and I certainly would welcome welcome the IARP to get this done as quickly as possible. But at least one school, and I would guess it's LSU, is going to not get its news until after this season ends. And I guess potentially Arizona and Sean Miller, it might be the same. So keep an eye on that. I know everyone wants this done as soon as possible. Again, the IARP will dissolve once those cases are all adjudicated, and we will go back to an NCAA-only Committee on Infractions, recently updated yet again for like the 5th time in 15 years kind of model. That's going all back to in-house with the NCAA. This is out. They've outsourced this, and schools might come to rue this day if indeed the Memphis case is a harbinger for what's to come with the other cases. Now, as for the other cases, I did ask about that as well because, Hugh Frazier did mention that they were conscious of the fact that they did not want to punish the current student athletes at Memphis, the current players on the team. And so I asked, was that, approach specific to this case, or might it be something that the panel could quasi-adopt and apply to future cases? Frazier was specific in saying it might be that we have no application of every case going forward, meaning just because we did this with Memphis doesn't necessarily mean we'll think the same way when we're talking about Kansas or Arizona or Louisville. All of those cases, yes, they're under the FBI umbrella. All of them are different. Kansas has 5 level 1s facing it. Then again, Memphis just had 4 of them, and it just got tossed away. So, but Memphis wasn't an FBI case. I don't know. Kansas still has its head coach there. Arizona doesn't. LSU doesn't. Louisville doesn't. So none of these cases, there are no 2 remaining cases that are exactly alike. That being said, athletic directors, NCAA, commissioners, coaches, fans, they're not going to care about that. They're just going to see all these are all the FBI cases. We want to have consistency across the board. I'll be interested to see when these come down. If we do have consistency, if we do have, any major sanctions come down. I cannot tell you right now that if you are a fan of Kansas or Arizona or Louisville or LSU, that if you saw the Memphis news here on September 27th, that it automatically means good things for your. I can't promise you that, but things could be worse. If Memphis got absolutely hammered, I would say you need to be wary given the facts of this case. They went light on them. What's your thoughts on and I'm not going to ask you predictions because we don't know, but expectations and where you think we go from here with the remaining 4 cases.
I have no expectations, no idea. I've been consistent on this. I'm out of the prediction business when it comes to punishments. They're wildly inconsistent. You can't take anything as a precedent. Sometimes they make sense. Often they don't. Like, why does Oklahoma State get a postseason ban but South Carolina doesn't? Like
right.
Just stuff like that.
Boynton tweeted a clown.
Right.
Oklahoma State's coach Mike Boynton actually tweeted a clown face earlier today.
Yeah, like I
tweeted our own Kyle. He quote tweeted KB Kyle Boone and
strong jaw. Yeah, I'd be.
Did you put that up yet? I think did you? What did he say on that? I just love the fact that a head coach is like going on social media and just.
What's outrageous? Like if you're Mike Boynton, I'd be furious too. I would be
parody
like of all of the stuff that's going on. We're the ones that got the postseason ban. Like it's crazy. And so I never predicted, and you get asked about this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
I never predicted what Memphis would get or what Kansas will get because I don't have any idea. I am surprised that it was this light for Memphis, but I never said they're definitely getting this, they're definitely getting that. I don't know. Nobody does. But I will say, if you asked me if I were a Kansas fan, would I be more optimistic than I was today? Yeah, I think so. And it's the main reason is because you have now had people connected to this process on multiple times publicly say that in one form or another, they are hesitant to punish student athletes who had nothing to do with this. That was said today. It's been said before. And if that is really a guiding light for these IARP cases, well, there's literally no way to implement a postseason ban without punishing student athletes who had nothing to do with it. It's impossible to do. And if
correct, but the way you get ahead of that is if you say it's going to be a year from now. So, if you want in, it's going to be your decision. That's the only way that you can do it and have minimal, I guess.
Yeah, but like you would still be punishing somebody who had nothing to do with it. You would give them an out. They would have an out. Right. But if they chose to stay, you would be punishing somebody who had nothing to do with this. And you got to remember when it comes to college students, these aren't just basketball players. These are like real people. I know that people love to talk about the transfer portal. Most people don't want to transfer. It's complicated. You lose some credits. You lose some friends. Maybe you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend on campus that you don't want to leave. So just because somebody has an out to leave doesn't mean it's in their best interest to leave. So if you implement a postseason ban, you're going to punish somebody who had nothing to do with this. And if it is really a guiding principle of theirs that they don't want to do that, and they have certainly suggested that multiple times recently, then if I'm a Kansas fan, I feel pretty good right now, or at least better than I otherwise would, because I've long been a believer that I don't want to say scholarship reductions don't matter, and being taken off the road doesn't matter, but anything short of a postseason ban, you can work around. Anything short of a postseason ban, you can keep your program running same way it's always been running.
Yeah, postseason ban's the biggie. The only other IARP decision that came before this one was last December. NC State, they got 1 year worth of probation. Orlando Early, a former assistant who then became an NBA scout, he got a show cause of 5 or 6 years. Mark Gottfried, the former coach, got a 1 year show cause, and that goes back to according to evidence that was shown in court and in testimony. I mean, you literally had money bag drops at doors tied to the Dennis Smith Jr. case. So the issues in that case, I think were not more. I know they were just plainly more egregious than the Memphis one. And NC State, again, they didn't have no one on staff remained, but they didn't get a postseason ban. Yes, you did have show causes handed down by the IARP. All the other ones have been NCAA cases. I mean, the Oklahoma State one, that was a 1-year postseason ban that just got served. Lamont Evans got a 10-year show cause, and Oklahoma State's still on probation with that. But other schools, like Bruce Pearl sat for a couple of games. They're on probation right now. Chuck Person got a lengthy show cause when that happened. Lamont Evans got a show cause tied to the South Carolina stuff at South Carolina. The Oklahoma State, South Carolina, so I'll never understand. Having sat in that courtroom, watched everything, listened to all the testimony, I'll never understand how Oklahoma State and South Carolina were so different, because Lamont Evans was at both those universities, and some of the stuff that he did while at South Carolina and was caught surreptitiously on video saying was just as bad as the stuff he was caught doing in Oklahoma State. I digress. Other ones that were NCAA, and remember, this is not IARP, this is NCAA, just a refresher for our listeners. Creighton, USC got a 2-year probation period. TCU got a 3-year probation period. Former assistants got show causes at all of those schools of varying lengths there. So there will be, I would think that the IARP will hand down show causes to affected parties only because at the NCAA level and the IARP level, as it pertains to the FBI cases, not Memphis now, as it pertains to the FBI cases, literally Oklahoma State, Alabama, Auburn, South Carolina, USC, Creighton, TCU, NC State, all schools enveloped by the FBI case. All of them had former staff members handed show causes down. Now, that does not all are postseason bans. Not all head coaches served for 10, 15, 20 game suspensions. Bruce Pearl had a light one. So I do think that there will be punishments coming. But I remember I want to hold myself accountable here. I remember being definitive multiple times on this podcast thinking that Kansas would face a postseason ban. I'm not as confident today in that as I have been previously, based in part on the IARP decision with Memphis here. But I just wanted to at least refresh listeners on every single school that was roped into the FBI stuff. Like, there have been, some punishments handed down, and some, you can't come and coach. You got to show us cause why you should be able to coach again in college athletics. That has happened. Lengthy ones too, 5 years, 10 years. So I still think some tough stuff is coming for all those schools. The question is, though, will Bill Self have to sit a game or 5 or 10 or 15? Will Kansas be permanently eligible for every postseason moving forward? Same with LSU. Will Wade's not there. I had a source tell me in recent days that Will Wade's feeling a little bit more optimistic about the nature of his case and how it pertains. God bless him, right? So we'll see. In the IRP, which is going to dissolve next year, Parrish, we might be talking about this next spring, look back at all these cases and be like, they basically did their job. They kind of went through the motions, but it looked like they just kind of threw their hands up. We're like, all right, we're good. That's definitely an outcome that could be on the table here. We wait and see. It's just hard for me to square Oklahoma State getting a postseason ban. And maybe if none of the other schools do, they don't. But OSU was far from the most deserving school to get that kind of a sanction there. So we await on what's next. I think it'll be Kansas that's next in line. We'll see if that comes before the season starts.
One last thing before we get out of here, Jonathan in the comments, and I only address this because I've seen multiple people make this point. He says, wasn't Penny at the courthouse with James Wiseman to get an injunction before the first game? That was actually before the second game. So the timeline is important. Wiseman played in the first game while ineligible, but the Memphis story at this point is Penny didn't know. Then the injunction comes before the second game. The injunction, by the way, never meant that Memphis had to play James Wiseman. Like a federal judge is not in charge of creating your starting lineup. He can't make you put somebody in a game. So they could have not deemed James Wiseman ineligible. That's what the NCAA asked them to do. We believe he's ineligible. You need to declare him ineligible and then seek reinstatement. Memphis just said double birds. We're playing him. But the injunction never made Memphis play James Wiseman. That's just not true. They played him because they wanted to. Here's my point. And again, I'm not going to fight. I'm happy that Memphis did not get a postseason ban. I would not want to talk every day about a team headed nowhere. But, all of this unfolded in real time. And Penny Hardaway was asked questions about the decision to play James Wiseman, why he did it, what he knew, what he could talk about, what he couldn't, all along. And never once did he say, listen, I didn't know he was ineligible. He never said that.
Yeah.
If people were questioning, like, let's say I'm the head coach and I just played a player and he's deemed ineligible and people are asking me, why did you play him? I'd say, truth is, I didn't know. I found out after the game. That's the story now. But that was never the story then. It was just about doing right by the kid, and we didn't think he did anything wrong. And it was never, I didn't know. Far as I can tell, that explanation didn't become an explanation until the lawyers got involved. And so it's just good lawyering. It's very good lawyering. They said, hey, we can maybe save your program and your head coach, but we're going to have to make your athletic department look ridiculous. And they said, okay, let's do it then. And it worked. Congratulations. But that's what it is.
Yeah, that's good day. Good day for Memphis. Good day for GP. Have an active radio show here. A lot to respond to here beyond just the Eye on College Basketball podcast. That's pretty much all I got, though. I mean, this is not the expected outcome, but hey, I think this case in many ways shines a light on some of the farces of this process to begin with. And I don't object to some of the stuff that's happening. Some of it does. I don't know. Some of it's a little hard to believe, but more power to you. And we'll see if Penny and Memphis can advance forward after finally making the tournament in year 4 last season. Now you don't have Duren there. Obviously, Imani Bates has moved on. And now that this will be behind him, it's really going to be, this is my bow, then shut us down, GP. We can get out of here. It feels like year 5 for Penny and Memphis. It feels like it's the first year now. Now this is done. That, like, yes, it still get plenty of attention. The city loves him. Like, that's a major attraction. Don't get me wrong. But, like, nationally, it just feels like the first year where there's just not a huge appendage attached to his tenure. There's no looming case. There's no, mega recruits, the Bates stuff and the Wiseman stuff. And so I'll be interested to see what Memphis is this season and if it can be its best version yet under Hardaway.
Yeah, like it's a probable but not definite NCAA tournament team. But there's no 5-star recruit. There's no controversy now connected to anything. It's just sort of like I don't want to say it's a normal college basketball team because it's not. It's a very old college basketball team. But it is wild. This is a guy who in year 2, his first game started 5 freshmen, and I believe became the first power conference coach or any level coach to start 5 freshmen in the first game of the season, like maybe in the history of college basketball. I could not find any other example. Even the Fab Five weren't the Fab Five till like January. So to contrast that with what he's now going to be starting, which is probably no freshman, like a 25-year-old DeAndre Williams, super seniors.
29-year-old, but yeah.
29-year-old DeAndre Williams. Like, to go, he's really changed his philosophy on what works and what doesn't, and made a real point to, I'm going to get old. I'm going to have an old team as opposed to a young team. Doesn't mean he wouldn't have taken a 5-star freshman if he could have got one, but they prioritized being older. And it should, I think, make the non-league portion of their schedule go a little more smoothly. Having Kendrick, having a true star at the 1 is something they've never had since Jeremiah Martin in year 1. If you even wanted to call Jeremiah Martin a star, he's a really good college player, played in the NBA too. But they primarily used Alex Lomax at point guard the past 4 years. I'm sure Alex is going to get his minutes, but it's now Kendrick Davis's job, and so I suspect that they'll be good, drama free for the most part, and good. But as always, we'll see. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Huck, Larnell. And thank you guys once again for listening to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Over at Apple, we need 5 stars and a nice review. Type some words. There's more of us than there are of them. Don't ever forget that. We'll talk to you again real soon. Until then, take care.